will vote on hastily drawn-up constitutional changes today. Prime Minister Boyko Borisov is looking for a political lifeline and has pushed the reforms, hoping to diffuse weeks of demonstrations. Nightly protests have become a regular sight on the street of the capital, Sofia. Swathes of the population are pushing back against organised crime and corruption, which have engulfed the political institutions and continue to blight the country. The Prime Minister has failed to follow through on an initial offer to resign, and lawmakers, eager for more meaningful reform, say they're largely uninterested in the proposed changes. Well, we can go to Sofia now. Our reporter, Damian Vodnicharov, joins us there from the capital. Damian, morning to you. Very busy as protesters are out as they await what's going to happen today with these constitutional changes. Just explain them a bit to us. What reforms is the Prime Minister pushing for, and how would it help him stay in power?
Good morning from noisy Sofia. The protesters have already gathered up this morning, and there have been protesters coming in from the countryside as well, not only from capital Sofia. There has been police coming in from the countryside as well. It's actually the first day that Parliament is reconvening after the summer holidays, and the Prime Minister and the ruling party, Prime Minister Borisov and the ruling Dead Party, are trying to put forward a whole new constitution. They're not just amendments. It's not just a few amendments or just one amendment. It's a whole new constitution that is largely inspired by the current constitution. Still, this is a very complicated process ahead of the ruling Dead Party and Prime Minister Borisov to get enough votes to be able to vote this new constitution in. It would have to be voted in by a very special institution, which is the Great National Assembly. This is not the regular parliament. This is a parliament that is specifically designed to vote the constitution. So there are long months of debates ahead of the ruling party. There are long months of votes ahead of the ruling party, which is why this move by Prime Minister Borisov is being interpreted as him clinging to power for a few months more before the regular elections in the spring.
I'm sorry it's a little bit difficult to hear, Damian. Thank you very much. From a very busy capital, Sofia. Well, we can get a little bit more analysis on this. Hristo Panchigov is assistant professor in the political science department at New Bulgarian University. Joining us also from Sofia, but a little bit quieter where you are. Thank you very much for your time. So let's just revisit what we were talking about. What are the constitutional changes that Boyko Borisov wants to push through, and what are his motivations in doing that? Does he think that's going to sort of more solidify his position, which right now is tenuous?
Well, actually, no one really believed that these constitutional changes are meaningful from the very beginning, since the plan that is pushed forward is poorly conceived and badly implemented. One of the biggest changes that is proposed in the amendment of the Constitution is the right of the head prosecutor to push forward legislation into Bulgarian parliament, which is totally the opposite of what currently the protests are wanted. They want limited prosecutor influence. Instead, we're getting more of it. But actually, the plan for the Constitution from the beginning looks like an attempt to basically postpone the inevitable, to postpone the resignation, to spin the narrative so that the government really gets on board with the protests in terms of changes to the constitution. It doesn't seem that it will work from this perspective.
It's interesting that you say that the resignation will be inevitable, because the Prime Minister has really tried to appease protesters up until now. You know, he's fired 4 ministers. Will anything satisfy those protesters unless the Prime Minister himself steps down, as he has promised he would? We just haven't seen that happen.
I don't think that anything else will suffice for the protesters. Basically, what the Prime Minister did up to this point simply confirmed what he has been accused of. The ministers that resigned were exactly the ministers that the protesters suspected were influenced by an external factors into this government. So by removing them, he basically confirmed what the protesters already asked for. So until this point, the prime minister has not really answered any of the questions that the protests asked, based on the influence of oligarchs, based on what happens with the pictures that we saw of the prime minister, the questions about who is actually at the forefront of his government. And until these questions are answered, the protesters will not basically end, I think. It will depend on what will happen today. A big protest has been summoned for the start of the debates on the constitutional changes in Bulgaria. If it gathers enough people, and probably it will, I don't expect that this government has a lot of options left from here on.
And we've got our reporter already this morning with protesters out in the capital as well. Thank you very much for your analysis, Hristo Panchigov, Assistant Professor in the Political Science Department at New Bulgarian University.